Hello, my name is Tori Smith, and I would like to do a daily report for the 3rd of May, 2016, for the MILAB child trafficking operation. And, excuse me, on this day, 154 children were brought in from 3 sources and then distributed to 9 locations. And the 3 sources that brought them in were ICE, AFRICOM, and NATO. ICE brought 27 of these children, and they were abducted in Southern California, along with 13 adults. Now, the 13 adults were then transported to the Yuma, Arizona Nazi concentration camp, which is just over the California-Arizona border. And that's probably the most busiest concentration camp. Of course, the government calls them FEMA campgrounds. It's that cute little euphemism of where they take people to be murdered. And 3 of these children were raped by 4 ICE males, a total of 7 times. Now, AFRICOM, I forgot the Republic of, let me see if I can, it was 96 children. They were abducted in the Republic of Congo. Okay, I'm sorry, I was just looking at their DNA. Normally it's real difficult for me to get names, and then a lot of times I write them down and then I don't have time to look them up and then I forget or whatever. And in this, it was once again what they do with AFRICOM. Well, the people of Africa have just basically been targets for millennia. And because Africa is a very rich continent, and the people generally don't have a lot of money or resources to protect themselves. And, well, when HIV was created, they injected it into 300 million Africans and effectively wiped out 2 generations of Africans. Of course, HIV can be simply removed from the body. But back then, we didn't know how to do it. 204 adults were taken, and they were just murdered. They were all shot. And then the children were taken to an AFRICOM outpost, and they were raped by 314 men. And NATO, 31 children were abducted in the Ukraine by NATO from a war crime area, from the United States war crime against NATO. The State Department is the one overseeing this war crime. And, of course, the CIA. All children were raped by NATO males, 107 of them, a total of 119 times. In North Dakota, then the children were distributed to 9 locations. North Dakota, 6 children were gang raped by a group of 76 males, a total of 151 times, including 14 corporate executives from war criminal companies. I think they call them war contractor companies, I forget now. CIA, FBI, DARPA, Navy, TSA, NSA, and DHS, and all 6 were killed by reptilians, while 17 watched. Now, in the financial district, I've been at this MILAB. It's really nasty what they do. And 6 children were gang raped by a group of 106 males, a total of 110 times. And there was 1 DARPA man running the show, and the rest were all Wall Street businessmen, you know, corporate executives. And these 6 children were killed by 6 CEOs. And it's just the way that what I witnessed when I was there, it was just like they were foaming at the mouth, you know, a line of these horrible criminals calling themselves Wall Street businessmen, you know, Wall Street brokers and whatnot, bankers. It's just, you know, the way they're like, well, do I get a little girl or do I get a little boy? I'd like a 4-year-old. I don't want one that's too old. You know, it's just the way they talk. It's just so repulsive. It's nasty. A lot of them, for a long time, would pay $43,000, you know, because they would funnel money. You know, the government funnels money to the banks and corporations, and then, sorry, I kind of lost my place there. But at the financial district, all these 6 children were killed by 6 CEOs. And then on to Dallas, 8 children were gang raped by a group of 42 males, a total of 73 times. including 2 DARPA, 6 CIA, 2 FBI, 6 Texas State Police, 3 Fort Worth police officers, and then the rest were corporate executives. And all 8 of these children were killed by CEOs of Texas companies. In Denver, 18 children were gang raped by a group of 91 males, a total of 197 times. All military, and 18 of these 18 children were killed by they were all killed by generals, military generals. And in Washington, D.C., MILAB number 1, 9 children were gang raped by a group of 106 males, a total of 307 times, including 42 U.S. senators. D.C. police, senators' aides, Secret Service, Army Special Ops, and all children were killed by senators. And, because this is, what they do is basically, because all the children are drugged, and when they ship them, and then what they do is once the children get to a MILAB, they put them all in cages. And then, of course, they make sure they're drugged. And then when it's time to begin, they bring the children out of the cages. They make sure that they're drugged because they like the children to be easily pliable. And the people like, the men want these children to be pretty well doped up so they don't put up any opposition. They like when they kill them, they choke them to death during forced intercourse. They like the children to be very easy to kill. They don't want to get punched or whatever, or kicked in the groin, or scratched by little girl fingernails. And Washington, D.C., number 2, 7 children were gang raped by a group of 66 males, a total of 94 times. And once again, U.S. Senate, 16 U.S. senators, 12 White House staff, NSA, TSA, DHS, Secret Service, and DARPA, and all 7 were also killed by senators. And there's so many people in America who think, I wonder what the Senate's doing today. Are they creating a new law to help us all? No, they're gang raping and murdering children underground. In Roswell, New Mexico, 33 of these children were gang raped by a group of 416 males, a total of 1,218 times. They were all military, and all 33 were killed by the Denabians, which I can finally pronounce their names. It's the Denabians. And these Denabians are a blend of 14 species, and they're trisexual. And the first thing I thought of when I heard that is, people of Indiana, the first thing out of their mouths would be, of course, is they're evil. They wouldn't, but, they're not going to fall in love. Trisexual people aren't going to be allowed to be married here. So these people that rape and murder children are so full of themselves. They think they're the highest level of morality. Like Mrs. Pence, the governor's wife. Her husband's murdered 50 children, and she walks around parading like she's some kind of a queen. They're lucky I'm not in charge, because none of them would be here. None of them. And none of them would get a trial. They would just go straight to the uncreated mass. In Dulce, 33 children were gang raped by a group of 369 males, a total of 997 times, all military, and all 33 were killed by reptilians. And what I would like to mention is a little boy named Sergi. It's spelled S-E-R-G-I. Sergi was a 5-year-old Ukrainian boy who was abducted by NATO. This child, 5-year-old boy, was raped a total of 209 times. Now, a lot of times in these really smaller children, the military, especially the military, the Army, and the Navy and the Air Force, they like to make the children bleed, and because they feel that wearing the blood of the child, the little boys especially, that they're sodomizing, they like to wear the blood on their genitalia as a badge of honor. And this little boy, he had a really difficult life. I mean, it's been going on in the Ukraine for quite a while. But when he was 2, it wasn't really too bad yet in his area, and he liked to push around a little truck, a little green truck. It was a simple, I believe, little metal truck. And when he turned 3, things started to go downhill, and he didn't really understand what was going on because kids don't understand. They brought in, but he was just afraid all the time. I mean, he was a little kid. He had dark hair. And this is just a horrible environment, what the United States does to people. And he only knew he was hungry a lot. A lot of times he only ate once a day. And his father liked to pat him on the head and give him some kind of like these biscuit cookies, which would be somewhat similar to what we have here in America called vanilla wafers or whatever. And when he was 4, things were much, much worse. And, he was basically afraid of everything, because children in war zones are basically afraid of everybody. They can't trust anybody. It's no environment for a child to and this is all purposely chosen for cash profit and corporate gain, like in the Iraq war crime. It was about funneling $8 trillion, to kill over 8 million people, so you get the human sacrifice, and then trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars transferred out of the United States taxpayer money into the hands of war criminals. And, it's very hard for these children to trust anybody. And in this case, and then the people that you love, it's like you're afraid to love somebody. And this little boy, it's like his mother's sister. He absolutely loved his aunt. And she was murdered. And, it becomes very hard for these children because, number one, they can't trust anybody. And the other thing is they don't want to become too attached to the people that they do love because they'll just end up getting murdered anyway. And it's such a horrific, painful thing. And, he spent most of his time very, very close to home. And at night, when he was a little older, over the past, 4 to, 5, I think he was about 5.5 years old, 5 years, 6 months. And a rather thin boy, and he had short black hair. And then he was, like I said, he was raped 209 times. And eventually he ended up at DULCE. And his life was ended by a reptilian from a sombrero. But when he died, of course his life was so incredibly traumatic. Because most people don't chart for war. I mean, soldiers chart for war most of the time, but people, innocent bystanders and civilians don't usually chart for war. And this was the case with this child. And he was extremely traumatized. And 3 angels picked him up after he was murdered at DULCE. And, they helped him go through a tunnel. And here it is, the 12th of May already. And this child is still cocooned. And if you're not aware, heaven calls certain kinds of death freakouts. And a freakout is when someone just doesn't handle the death process well. But a lot of times, with these children, it's not that they just can't handle the death, because most of them don't even really understand death because they don't remember the process, but they're so incredibly traumatized by being raped by the military, police, corporate executives, politicians, shuffled around, drugged heavily, put in cages, brought out, laid on tables, where men just line up and just sodomize these little boys over and over again. And, so by the time, and cocooning is a process with a healing process, and Mother and Father God heal those who are cocooned. It's literally just like when a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. They have to take the person, and because they're basically hysterical, and they calm them down with divine and sacred energies, and then put them in a cocoon, and then God heals them, and then eventually they're ready to come out. But this child is still in its cocoon because of his horrible life, of what most of the people were from the United States did to him. And I thank you for your prayers for these children, and I'm doing my best to get caught up. And thank you so much for your prayers to end this child trafficking operation.